Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, hi, my name is Monica. I like to post anti-MLMs, that's anti-multi-level marketing, life, and some true crime content here on this channel. So if any of that interests you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I would love for you to stick around. Today is the last part of my NXIVM series, but before we proceed, I do have to say that this is just based on my research. There's going to be some of my opinions sprinkled in here. This is all alleged, and I will leave all of my sources in the description box below. As I've said with most of the parts in this series, just proceed with caution with this, because if you have been watching, NXIVM was involved with a lot of sexual abuse and trafficking and all of that kind of stuff, allegedly. So make sure that you just proceed with caution if that is something that you cannot listen to. I know that this series has been very heavy, covering very sensitive topics, so I did just want to say that if you've watched all of them, I want to say a huge thank you, because I know that this is probably a hard series for some to watch. Along with that, I did want to also say thank you, because this took me a lot of time creating this series, doing all of the research, constantly having to re-edit videos. My patrons and my channel members know, constantly having to re-edit a video that's about to go up only because there's something else that I found and I just wanted to correct it in the video. So it did take me a lot of time, and it is a 6-part series. That whole playlist for the series will be linked below. Today, I'm going to go over the downfall and the aftermath of NXIVM. I truly believe that if it wasn't for the ex-NXIVM members and survivors telling their stories and being a voice, not only for themselves, but those who couldn't speak out regardless of what their reasoning was, they don't have to give a reason, which is something I wanted to add. But NXIVM might have still been operating today if it wasn't for these stories, these testimonials. It takes a lot of courage to speak out and be vulnerable to the public and media, because both of those can be ruthless and judgmental. Before I get into who was charged, what their sentences were, I wanted to provide you some more documentaries and content to consume if you'd like to learn more about NXIVM, or if there's something that I didn't cover, or something that goes a little bit more in depth on something that I covered in this series. I did speak on a few of these types of things throughout the series, but in case you didn't watch the other parts, because there are a lot of parts to the series, as I already said, I wanted to share them all in one video. If any of you have any more content to share regarding NXIVM, whether it be documentaries, podcasts, books, whatever you want to add, if you want to leave some recommendations, leave them in the comment section below. I know that if you leave links, I would ask you to leave links. I know that sometimes when that happens, YouTube will flag that and put that into my held for review comment section box thing, whatever you want to call it, but sometimes it'll put it in held for review. So I'm going to be monitoring the comment section for this video, so in case something does get popped into held for review, I will approve it and let it go through. So as I said, if you have anything that you want to add, any other content to watch, just leave it in the comment section below. But let's get into some more content that you guys can watch, listen to, read, whatever you prefer to do. The documentaries that I wanted to share are The Lost Women of NXIVM, which goes over the women that I spoke about in part 3 of this series. The Vow, this was released just last year in 2020, and it goes over the experiences of NXIVM survivors. That has been renewed for a 2nd season. Seduced, Inside the NXIVM Cult. This documentary features India Oxenberg's story, and from some comments I've received throughout this series, it seems like that is a good documentary to watch. One commenter even said that it was better than The Vow. Beyond the Headlines, Escaping the NXIVM Cult with Gretchen Carlson. I haven't heard too much about this one, but in the one article, it did say it's a Lifetime production, and it focuses on Catherine Oxenberg's story and her fight to save India, which is her daughter, from the cult. The next portion is going to be podcasts. The first one is Uncover Escaping NXIVM, A Little Culty by Sarah Edmondson. One podcast episode that I will leave linked below as well is from a channel called Robertaglass True Crime, and this was recommended by one of you. In this very same podcast episode by Roberta, she interviewed an ex-NXIVM member, Susan Dones, who spoke about how she had suspicions about Kristen Snyder's death, along with having a tape where Keith spoke about how he's been able to have people killed. However, I did not hear the tape for myself. This is just what was said by the person who was being interviewed. Susan talked about her involvement with NXIVM, and towards the end of the podcast, she said that too many people are focusing on Keith, that Nancy abused people too, which I think is fair to say given she was in it and she was very close to Nancy. This was sent to me when I was already almost finished with the last portion of my research for this part of the series, which is why I'm just gonna leave it below for you guys to listen to rather than tell the story, because it's a very interesting podcast to listen to. There's a lot of twists and turns, so I just recommend listening to that podcast. Then we have books about NXIVM. Scarred, The True Story of How I Escaped NXIVM, The Cult That Bound My Life by NXIVM survivor Sarah Edmondson. Still Learning, which is by NXIVM survivor India Oxenberg. The program Inside the Mind of Keith Raniere and the Rise and Fall of NXIVM by investigative journalist Chet Hardin and NXIVM survivor Tony Natalie. Captive, A Mother's Crusade to Save Her Daughter from a Terrifying Cult by NXIVM survivor India Oxenberg's mother, Catherine Oxenberg, and New York Times bestselling author Natasha Stoyanov. Then there's a few extra little tidbits of information if you're interested. If you want to learn more about cults, then you can go ahead and check out Rick Allen Ross or Stephen Hassan. These are great people to speak on this topic, along with taking a look at the Bite Model by Stephen Hassan, which can be found online. It's very readily available to you. Speaking of some extra content to watch regarding NXIVM, let's chat about how there was an email campaign that was trying to delay the vow. What's not very surprising to me is the controversy that broke out about the vow being released. Well, it's not really controversy. It was more so NXIVM members being upset about this and starting an email campaign to prevent the series from premiering on HBO, allegedly. The name of the documentary did come from DOS, which is one of the secret societies that I spoke about throughout this entire series, but more so in part 4 and part 5. The vow was a nickname for DOS, and if you haven't been following along, it involved branding and sex trafficking. To be a part of this group, you had to provide collateral, or what I would call, in other words, blackmail. You had to give the masters nudes along with other things that are personal and private so that you would actually keep the secret of DOS. Well, that was according to the masters. In my opinion, I do think that it was blackmail so that you just wouldn't speak out against this subgroup of NXIVM. Sarah Edmondson even said that she had to fabricate footage about her husband abusing her and her son, even though that wasn't true. Because the vow showed images and clips of some seminars that NXIVM members attended, those members have now alleged that this violates their privacy, so they were asking for these clips to be removed. Now, I'm kind of tossing up how I feel about this, because it could be one of two things. It could be that this has nothing to do with how these members feel about this violating their privacy and everything to do with the members just not wanting information out there in the open about NXIVM if they're still current members, or if they still, I guess you could say, support what NXIVM is all about or support Keith Raniere. The Times Union did have a copy of the email that was sent from the members, and a portion of the email says, quote, "I did not and do not issue consent for my likeness to be used for commercial purposes, and therefore I do not consent for HBO to use footage of me for any reason without my written permission," end quote. Clearly that email didn't scare HBO from releasing the vow. They actually, as I said earlier, renewed it for our second season back in October of 2020. The only other thing that I could think of is that the media twisted this narrative, and these people, in fact, didn't want to be featured or shown, and they're currently deprogramming from NXIVM. I'm going to, in good faith, hope that HBO and whoever's behind all of that they did look into these people and did look to see if they are currently deprogramming from NXIVM and that they really truly aren't having their privacy violated. I'm leaning more towards the first one that I was talking about how these people could possibly still be supporting NXIVM and Keith Raniere, because I don't think that a documentary that is so focused on the victims, from what I've read and from what I've heard, because I haven't watched it myself, but I just don't think that they would broadcast something if other victims were really upset about it. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But how did NXIVM come crumbling down? In 2017, there was a Times article that came out about PHO3NIX and NXIVM. Former NXIVM members and victims spoke about what Keith had done to them. After this was published, Keith actually fled to Mexico, and on January 18, 2018, a search warrant was issued for Keith's email account. Then, in February of 2018, a complaint was issued in federal court requesting an arrest warrant. I guess Keith thought he was going to try to get away with this, but it wasn't too long after that complaint was issued that Keith was captured. In March of 2018, Mexican authorities found Keith in a villa outside Puerto Vallarta. Later on, Lauren Salzman would say that the arrest interfered with an alleged planned group sex session. When police arrived, Lauren and Keith had barricaded themselves inside of the master suite. The Mexican federal police deported him back to the United States. Keith was charged with sex trafficking, conspiracy for sex trafficking, and conspiracy to commit forced labor. He pled not guilty. In July of 2018, Keith, along with several others, were indicted on other charges including racketeering, identity theft, and extortion. On May 7, 2019, Keith's federal trial began. Prosecution witnesses included Lauren Salzman, Mark Vicente, victims identified as, and they put these names in quotes, so I'm assuming it's probably they're just giving them they're just trying to keep them anonymous, but Sylvia, Daniela, and Nicole, along with Rick Ross. On June 19th, 2019, it took a jury less than 5 hours to find Keith guilty on all charges. These included sexual exploitation of a child and possession of child. The word that starts with a P and ends in ornography, because I don't really want to get flagged all that much here on YouTube, but with regard to a victim who was a minor. Sex trafficking of another victim and attempt sex trafficking of yet another victim. Identity theft against Edgar Brofman, Yapez Loperfido, I don't know if I'm saying that properly, Ashana Chenoa, Mariana, and Pam Kafritz. Trafficking for labor and services of Daniela and forced labor of Nicole. Conspiracy to alter records for use in an official proceeding. And then on October 27th of 2020, a federal judge by the name of Nicholas Garafis sentenced Keith to 120 years in prison and fined him $1.75 million. As of January of this year, 2021, Keith started his 120-year sentence at the United States Penitentiary Lewisburg, which is a maximum security penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. On January 22nd of 2021, he was transferred to the United States Penitentiary Tucson, which is in Tucson, Arizona. Keith is right where he belongs, in my opinion. On April 20th, 2018, Allison Mack was arrested in Brooklyn by the FBI. She was charged with sex trafficking conspiracy, and forced labor conspiracy. The prosecution allegedly also accused Allison of a sham marriage with Nikki Klein, only to help Nikki with the U.S. immigration laws. On April 24th, 2018, Allison was released on a $5 million bond and was held under house arrest under the custody of her parents in California. Allison was charged with recruiting women into DOS as well. On April 8th of 2019, Allison Mack pleaded guilty to racketeering, conspiracy, and racketeering charges and was scheduled for sentencing in September of 2019. As per E, Allison said, quote, "Through it all, I believed PHO3NIX's intentions were to help people. I was wrong. I must take full responsibility for my conduct, and that is why I'm pleading guilty today. I am and will be a better person as a result of this," end quote. Her sentencing has been postponed to give the court sufficient time to conduct pre-sentencing investigations. At the time of filming this video, Allison Mack still hasn't been sentenced. However, it's reported that she can be facing a maximum of 40 years in prison. Nancy Salzman, who was the prefect in Keith's number 2, having a gold sash, which I went over in part 2 of this series, pled guilty in March of 2019 to charges of conspiracy racketeering under the jurisdiction of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York. Along with that, Nancy was found guilty of obstructing justice in a civil suit between NXIVM and a former student by editing and removing portions of session videos to favor the appearance of the company. According to the New York Post, Nancy said, quote, "I want you to know I am pleading guilty because I am, in fact, guilty. I accept that some of the things I did were not just wrong, but sometimes criminal. I justified them by saying that what we were doing was for the greater good. I still believe that some of what we did was good." End quote. Nancy is still awaiting sentencing. The general consensus that I've been getting from a lot of people that were in NXIVM, a lot of people that have spoken out, they did believe that they were doing something good. Nancy's daughter, Lauren Salzman, is awaiting sentencing after pleading guilty to conspiracy charges in March of 2019. In May of 2019, Lauren spoke about the day when she tried to hide Keith in the villa that they were in Mexico. She said, quote, "It never occurred to me that I would choose Keith and Keith would choose Keith." End quote. I'm not shocked that Keith would choose himself and expect his followers to protect him at all costs. It's sad that it took all of this and so much time for some of these people to realize that. Don't get me wrong. They did terrible things and should do the time for the crime, but I can't help but wonder if it wasn't for Keith, would they have ever done something like this? Judging by what some of these women have said so far within this video, I'm starting to believe that Keith loved the control that he had and he was well aware of what he was doing, allegedly, in my opinion. Or he was so disturbed that he believed in all of this, but I'm leaning more towards him being well aware of his actions. Claire Brofman, who, as mentioned in previous videos, is the heiress to the Seagram fortune along with her sister Sarah. Both Claire and Sarah were involved with NXIVM. Claire was arrested by federal agents on July 24th, 2018 in New York City, charged with money laundering and identity theft. She pleaded not guilty in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn. Claire was released on a $100 million bail and placed under house arrest with monitoring. On April 19th, 2019, Claire pleaded guilty to conspiracy to conceal and harbor illegal aliens for financial gain and fraudulent use of identification. I know there are going to be people in the comment section saying that it's undocumented immigrants and not illegal aliens, but I just wanted to say that I'm going by what some articles have written. In addition, I'm not 100% sure, but I do think that that is the terminology that they use in court. However, correct me if I am wrong in the comments section. Without a plea deal, there was a possibility that she could have faced up to 25 years. But with the plea deal on September 30th, 2020, she was sentenced to 6 years, 9 months in prison. In addition, she was fined $500,000 in order to pay restitution to one of the victims in the amount of $96,605. What infuriates me just a tad is a week after her sentencing, her lawyers asked for her to be freed from the detention center while she appeals her sentence. This was because her lawyers said that the prosecution had asked for only 5 years. With that, Claire also had a liver condition that meant she was at a higher risk for contracting COVID. In the end, they came to an agreement that she could serve her sentence at a minimum security facility. There was a class action lawsuit filed against Sarah in 2018 in the Brooklyn Supreme Court. This lawsuit was asserting that Sarah tricked Isabella Martinez and Gabriel Leal, among others, to be part of these classes that were part of a fraudulent scheme nationwide. In part 4, I spoke about some of these secret societies, along with talking about Rainbow Cultural Garden, which was for children to be able to learn other different languages. And Sarah, along with her husband, founded the Athol Education Group, which was kind of like a rainbow facility in the UK. What I didn't find until my research for this part, which is after I had already filmed and edited part 4, was that authorities did close the school in 2020. On January 28th, 2020, Sarah and Claire Brofman were named as defendants when 80 victims sued NXIVM due to sex trafficking and forced labor. Someone that I haven't mentioned in this series yet is Kathy Russell. Kathy was NXIVM's accountant for more than a decade. In April of 2019, she pled guilty to visa fraud after she knowingly presented false documentation to the consulate in Mexico just to bring a NXIVM member into the United States. In May of 2019, Kathy had requested that she can relocate to Georgia because she couldn't find a job. I mean, it's kind of obvious why. She had family in Georgia and she wanted to go there to get back on her feet. The federal judge did sign off on this relocation, and at the time she was allowed to move without an ankle monitor. As of a New York Post article dated January 21st, 2020, sentencing for Kathy has been indefinitely pushed back. Her lawyers had asked to push it back to April 21st while they wait for the probation department to issue a recommendation for Kathy's sentence. She could get up to 10 years in prison for this charge, but she could also get 6 months to a year. One article said that prior to pleading, Kathy used her Fifth Amendment right more than 80 times when she went before a grand jury so that she wouldn't incriminate herself. So I guess the final question is, what exactly happened to NXIVM as a whole? It's unknown, but there has been speculation. While the website no longer exists, there is an archive version from before it was taken down that said, quote, "It is with deep sadness that we inform you we are suspending all NXIVM ESP enrollment, curriculum, and events until further notice. While we are disappointed by the interruption of our operations, we believe it is warranted by the extraordinary circumstances facing the company at this time. We continue to believe in the value and importance of our work and look forward to resuming our efforts when these allegations are resolved," end quote. Some have speculated, and I'm going to speculate the same, that NXIVM isn't truly gone. There are still Keith and NXIVM supporters out there. The part of the series before this one, I spoke about Nikki Klein and how she and others were dancing outside of the prison where Keith was. After that, I did a little more digging into this, and according to the Times Union, these dance parties or organizations, whatever you wish to call it, went under the name We Are As You and the Forgotten Ones on the website. Some of the people who were dancing claim this was to lift the spirits of the prisoners, and they really didn't make mention of NXIVM. Nikki spoke about how she had a friend, PHO3NIX, inside, and how she doesn't even know what a sex cult is.
So my name is Eduardo Asunsolo, and I'm one of the founders of the Forgotten Ones. We come and we dance for the people inside of MDC Brooklyn. Because of COVID, they haven't had visits in like 6 months almost. July 3rd was the first day that we came. So it's been, I guess, almost 20 days in a row, every day 8 to 9. And from inside, we get reports that the morale is up, that there's less violence, that they have something to look forward to, which seems to be really, really good for them. My friend in there is Keith Raniere. I was a teacher in NXIVM for 10 years, which, you know, that's why we didn't want at first to say who we were, because we knew it was going to be done, it was going to be made about these things.
We have a friend who is incarcerated here. He's been here since March 2018. As you do with people that you've known for a long time, you have inside jokes. And one of my party tricks is doing a moonwalk. So I did a moonwalk and a bunch of guys started banging on their windows. So we're like, oh, that's probably fun for them to see. It's probably not every day that they see that. And it evolved to turning on the car stereo and dancing and like shining our lights and waving. You know, I took classes for many years with Executive Success Programs, which is affiliated with NXIVM. I think what's really sad is that we're out here doing something really good that is helping a lot of people. And people can't get past this idea that we were in something called a sex cult, which I don't even know what that is. I certainly was never part of a sex cult.
Mark Vicente believes that this is just a Trojan horse, that this movement or organization is just a cover-up for Keith's followers. Some of the well-known people of these organizations, and I use that term loosely, dancing outside the prison are high-ranking NXIVM officials that still believe in Keith. Those are people like Danielle Roberts, who was a doctor that allegedly branded 13 women, Nikki Klein, a high-ranking DOS member, and Eduardo Asunsolo, who was a high-ranking NXIVM member that also supported Keith in court. You can form your own opinions on that, but I do believe NXIVM is still alive, but maybe operating more secretively than ever before. I think the Forgotten Ones organization was started by NXIVM members for Keith, and because other people started to join in, the NXIVM members were okay with it because it would disguise what they were actually doing. That's just my theory though. I can be completely wrong, but there's still Keith and NXIVM supporters out there, which terrifies me. I mean, there's people out there who support people like Chris Watts and Ted Bundy, so that terrifies me too. That concludes this series, well, at least for now, until the sentencing happens for everybody else. I will make an updated video about the sentencing in the future, and depending on if I find more information or not, I might add it to the series, but for now, this has come to a close. And I want to say that if it wasn't for the courage of those who spoke out and their experience in NXIVM, the victims' stories, these people may not have been charged, at least maybe not yet. And I know that I said this in the beginning of this video, but I did want to just reiterate that because some people can be really vicious when it comes to ex-cult members, but we need to remember that these victims are broken down and built back up the way that the cult sees fit. Victims who spoke out against the cult deserve empathy because it's not easy telling a traumatic story. Put yourself in their shoes. You are promised an amazing women empowerment group, for example, like Janess and DOS, something you've been looking for because you're at a vulnerable part in your life. Then you join and get indoctrinated into this disturbing world. There are some who are afraid or maybe even ashamed or embarrassed to tell their stories. But I don't think we should shame the victims, even though we may not understand why they did what they did. So you guys let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let me know if you want to add anything to the discussion. Is there something that I missed? Is there something that I didn't talk about? And I know that I didn't talk about everything because there is so much to NXIVM and so much to this case. So I know I didn't cover everything. So with that said, if you have anything to add, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you so much for this wild past few weeks of covering NXIVM, talking about NXIVM. I know it wasn't easy, and some people probably skipped certain parts of this series because it was something that they just could not listen to. So for those of you who watched one video or the entire series, I just want to say thank you so much. I really wanted to research this as much as I possibly could, which is why it had to be broken up into parts, and each topic had its own part in this series. So I guess that is all that I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. This is Monica reporting to you live from a highway. Bye.